On behalf of the UKIFC and Ethical Finance 2021, I would very much like to thank John Glenn, Economic Secretary for the Treasury, for his ongoing commitment to the Islamic finance industry in the UK as a whole, and specifically his ongoing support for Global Islamic Finance SDG Task Force. I very much look forward to seeing him at the Task Force meeting at COP26 in Glasgow in November. I'm now really pleased to invite someone who is one of the early pioneers and advocates of the Islamic finance industry, both in the UK and internationally, stretching back over 30 years, Stella Cox CBE, Managing Director of DDCAP Group, to talk about the Taskforce initiative. Stella and the DDCAP Group are a founding task force member and have been long-term supporters of the UK Islamic Finance Council and the Global Ethical Finance Initiative. Welcome, Stella. We're really looking forward to hearing from you about your experiences with the task force. Let's start with why DDCAP and yourself became involved with the task force.
Well, thank you, Sultan. Thank you for your kind introduction. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be here today. DDCAP has indeed been an early and a strong supporter of the UKIFC SDG Task Force. Since our founding back in 1998, we've become known as a provider of asset facilitation services across a diverse range of Sharia compliant products and instruments. And we've also initiated development of automated financial system solutions to support the offerings. Now, at DDCAP, we've always aimed to be a first mover in our space and to lead by example. And we're committed to developing a more sustainable, equitable and prosperous world by connecting the Islamic financial marketplace responsibly. So we very much support the view that those in business must adopt strategies that go beyond delivering financial results to achieving positive social and environmental outcomes. So having made our own commitment to Sharia standards with the establishment of our Sharia Supervisory Board in 2013, for us it felt that the natural next steps were to work towards best practice standards for sustainability and responsibility. So we took a gradual path to adopting that. We progressed gradually through looking at internal policy and procedures and shaping our business so that it supported our own corporate aspirations. And interestingly, we also have appointed an SRA champion, Sustainable and Responsible Actions champion, Dr. Mohammed Akram Laldin, who sits within our own Sharia Supervisory Board. So the development of our SRA policy has been shaped externally as well. It's not just been a matter of the internal work. We've linked into multinational initiatives to promote responsibility and sustainability and the increased awareness of ESG concerns, including the UN SDGs, with which we align specifically. So through the task force agenda and its outreach, we're actually finding opportunity to build upon our own policies and extend our existing engagement with various multinational networks and frameworks. And I'll give you an example. DDCAP became a service provider signatory to the UN endorsed Principles for Responsible Investment in 2016. And at that time, it's 5 years ago, but we were proud to be the first Islamic financial sector service provider to be awarded signatory status. And at that point, we were amongst just 3 signatories from the Islamic financial industry. More recently, we've become stakeholder endorser of the UN Principles for Responsible Banking. So we've made a commitment to promote the PRB within our networks and support its implementation and encourage the banks within our sector to become signatories. So Sharia compliant financial practice has this really long history of alignment with financing for social impact. And as we lead up to COP26 in 2021, there's been a real conscious effort to embrace this opportunity to bring focus to the environment with firms, including my own, looking at ways that we can improve our impact and improve our footprint individually, assist our stakeholders, but also collaborate with like-minded organisations to do the same. And as the task force has developed, it's provided such an important forum for our industry discussion and debate. But it's also been inclusive in as much as it has its observers and supporters that extend beyond our core industry as well. So that's enabling us to connect and share experiences and best practices with a view to developing a more consistent approach among Islamic financial institutions to disclosure and reporting. And Sultan, you spoke just now about the two working groups within the task force. Our engagement with the disclosure and reporting working groups presenting us with a great opportunity to further our commitment to the PRB, again, particularly in this lead up to COP26. So we feel that our sector's alignment along that of its banks and institutions with the PRB, or indeed the PRI as may be appropriate, is a key first step to committing to the continued development of Islamic finance as a more sustainable sector.
Stella, you're clearly very involved in the task force, and DDCAP are contributing greatly. How do you see that the task force initiative is different, maybe from other projects?
Well, I think where there's been an engagement by the Islamic financial industry and its participants with the SDGs until now, it's tended to be more on the S, or the social, of ESG, with less emphasis typically on environmental considerations or on initiatives like UN-endorsed PRI or the PRB, which are clearly supporting governance. So the SDG Task Force has been positioned to help address this disconnect, which you mentioned just now, and promote engagement with and adoption of the UN SDGs by Islamic financial institutions globally. It's been encouraging actually to see how many Islamic financial industry stakeholders and influencers, including our own infrastructure and standard setting bodies and best practice organisations, and I'm talking about SIBAFI, for example, and AOFI, have embraced its formation from concept through launch and into mobilisation. Further support, of course, has been extended by the Islamic Development Bank, and I think the bank in itself has really pushed the envelope in recent years in terms of its own commitment to funding and investment for impact and sustainability. And since the launch of the UK Task Force, or the UK chapter, I might describe it, in 2020, it's been very evident how the industry support has increasingly mobilised across our footprint, and it now involves representation by governments and figureheads within public and private sector organisations from Islamic finance's key territories within South and Southeast Asia, the Middle East and Africa. So in support of developing and accelerating a more rounded contribution by the industry, the work of the SDG Global Task Force, with the working groups in education and awareness and reporting and disclosure, really distinguishes it, because it's so vital in promoting the E and the G, particularly again as we come up towards COP26. So we've also been very strong supporters of the working groups and their goals, because through those working groups we can help to create the pathways for greater practical engagement by our industry IFIs, and also understand actual and potential consumer demand. So that's a real practical element, because through the work of the groups, it's going to help us educate consumers and clients so that we in turn can highlight to institutions where the demand for SDG-linked financing is. And that in turn, we hope, is going to really prompt the opportunity to develop more SDG-focused instruments and financial solutions across our banks and financial institutions.
And so you challenges in your answer just then around, extending the S to the E and the G. Do you see that there are other challenges for Islamic financial institutions in this space, and what are the opportunities, more importantly, that they could take advantage of?
Yeah, it's a great question. The key tenets underlying Islamic finance, which differentiate it from conventional practices, provide us with a very natural alignment to the SDGs and their targets, or should do. For example, humans being the stewards of the planet. But as I think you mentioned, research has shown that there's actually limited engagement by the global sector with the SDGs, as well as more broadly with sustainable finance. So even if you take example, if you look at the Islamic capital market and our nascent green sukuk market, the proportion of green standard issuance is still really a long way below that of the conventional market. And whilst there's growing demand for an offering of retail and SME banking SDG linked products, the same offering is not always made available in our Sharia compliant space or through Sharia compliant structures. The UK Islamic Finance Council has put its assessment on our industry financial assets pushing up towards $4 trillion next year. And Islamic finance has begun to demonstrate innovations and financial engineering to support the creation of those new instruments and solutions that will attract and deploy capital to deliver against the SDG objectives. We have the capacity to mobilise funds to address the $5 to $7 trillion annual funding gap to meet the 2030 target. But through the efforts of the task force, as we move through this year, we have to focus on the interconnectivity of the 17 SDGs, and particularly how climate change, with COP26 on the horizon, is going to impact our progress to meet these goals and has to be addressed. I took on board your points about Maqasid al-Sharia being the objectives and purpose behind our compliance and how we put that into practice. And SDG alignment supports the tayyib or wholesome concept, and that in turn supports the focus of Islamic financial products and services being for broader societal impact. But recognising the enormity of committing to an undertaking that would be tasked to rise to this challenge, whilst at the same time accommodating the many different perspectives and priorities of, and I don't describe us as niche, but a specialist industry sector with an extending global footprint to deliver practical outcomes. Look, at times it's been disconcerting, but at the same time, we can see now that our industry leaders and influencers have been very diligently exploring for some years the nexus between Islamic financial market disciplines and practices and those of other responsible and sustainable financial market subsets. And the purpose of that exploration is to make sure that we can contribute fully and effectively to the global agenda and to action. So the outcome of the debate and discussion has resulted in various Islamic financial sector initiatives, but amongst them, it's translated into the formation of the SDG Task Force. Already, I think from that, the UK chapter has been effective in demonstrating thought leadership and also pioneering proactivity through its approach to championing consistency through global best practice and standards alignments, which is really very important if we are to bolster our industry sector's approach to sustainable and responsible financial practices that are going to serve to deliver against the requirements of the SDGs. I'd say in conclusion to this that Islamic finance really does have its own unique identity. I truly believe that. It still does. It has an ethos that results from being a faith-based subset of responsible finance and investment. But the call to action for firms to contribute to wider positive impact is one that, in my opinion, we can't afford to ignore.
Thanks, Stella. And that's fascinating because it sounds like there's a clear prerogative for the Islamic finance industry to get involved, but there's also a clear opportunity, to benefit as well as an industry, as well as benefiting the society as a whole. So, I think the task force is pioneering and blazing the way with making that opportunity clear to the industry as a whole. So that's fantastic. And finally, our chance to promote UK PLC. I know this is a question that you've probably been asked more than anybody else in the world, I suspect. Can you summarise how the UK has become the Western hub for Islamic finance?
Yes, I'd love to. It's been such a long while now, and we've worked together for a long time too, Sultan, that it becomes difficult to summarise it. But if I'll try and do that, I'd say that one reason that the UK has achieved such prominence in Islamic finance is because of supportive government policy. And I'm not just saying that because we've just heard from the EST, but I think to a great degree, the UK government sought to create a level playing field for Islamic and conventional financiers through its endeavours to ensure that nothing in terms of financial legislation and regulation actually prohibits the availability of financial products and offerings. Now, it hasn't always been a smooth path, and we know that the UK has had a proactive role to play in supporting the development of contemporary Islamic finance since the mid-1970s. But actually, if we trace government initiatives back to 2001, when motivated actually by an agenda of financial inclusion, the Bank of England convened a working party to investigate the barriers to development of Islamic financial services in the UK, and then embarked on this process of legislative reform to make sure that Sharia compliant products and services weren't impaired. And that sort of led to the authorisation of the first Sharia compliant bank in the UK, which happened in 2004. But in terms of us as practitioners, you know, London's always been very important for developing Islamic financial services. I started my career in Islamic finance right back in the 1980s, and I was working at an investment bank structuring short-term trade and commodity investments for Islamic banks here, utilising our market infrastructure and particularly the London Metal Exchange environment. And we know that since then, the London Stock Exchange has become an important platform for Sharia compliant capital market instruments. So also our related professional services available from the UK's legal and advisory firms have complemented not just product and business origination, but it's also extended our global outreach. And we've contributed, and you know, George is here this morning, through the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment, we have this Islamic finance qualification, which is statistically supported as the most successful professional qualification in Islamic finance that's been launched to date. So over the past 20 years, the UK government continued to develop policy and shape strategy that's been generally supportive of Islamic finance. And, you know, we've had our high points. We had the inaugural sovereign sukuk that was issued in 2014. And since then, as recently as this year, Her Majesty's Treasury has come back to the market again with its second sukuk, doubling in issuance size, which is always very positive. But it's this collaborative approach by public and private sector. And a couple of years ago, private sector established the UK Islamic FinTech panel in response to the momentum that was being created here within the entrepreneurial approach to creating Sharia compliant FinTech. And it's very interesting because actually London's status as a global international financial centre, combined with the UK's prominence in FinTech, has helped us position as a leading Islamic FinTech hub. So what is very important right now is to see that with the coexistence of so much Islamic financial sector capacity and capability, it's created a lot of significant additional benefits for the UK itself. It's made the UK a very attractive destination for Sharia compliant investment, and particularly we know the inflows that historically have come from the GCC and Southeast Asia. But during the past year, despite the pandemic, we've seen quite an acceleration of foreign direct investment, and that's been accompanied by an elevating interest by major asset and wealth management firms that offer Sharia compliant investment services and products that embody sustainable, responsible and ESG considerations. So these investment flows, which have historically been deployed towards real estate and infrastructure, are also being targeted towards eligible securities, including equities and ETFs that have sustainable approaches attached to them. But it's also serving to support the development of our UK halal economy. And I have to say that we have some really exciting Sharia compliant firms here in media, in fashion, leisure, food, pharmaceuticals. And we rank pretty impressively amongst our global counterparts. But in terms, just to wrap up again on this point, I think I would just like to highlight as I finish, because I'm from the financial sector, that the Islamic or Sharia compliant digital banking and financial solutions from established institutions, but also these new disruptors that we've been talking about, have such potential to increase financial inclusion, working from the UK, but across the OIC, encompassing all sorts of different opportunities to embody SMEs, medium-sized enterprises, businesses that are being developed by women and for women. And you know, a lot of the work that is happening from these firms here is actually going to serve to meet the objectives and the targets of many of the SDGs. So I think I'll wrap up on that point. So I could talk about the UK for a long time.
I was going to say, Stella, you could talk for hours on it, and that's why you're the best person to answer that question. And at UKIFC, the Islamic Finance Council, we've witnessed this over the decades, and very much appreciate your contribution to that growth in Islamic finance in the UK and beyond. So many thanks, Stella. We're kind of out of time now. And it's been a really enlightening discussion. You've clearly got passion and commitment still for our wonderful industry. And of course, my gratitude on behalf of the UK Islamic Finance Council to the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, for his pre-record, and of course the Global Ethical Finance Initiative for putting on such a wonderful conference. So thank you very much, everybody, and from the task force, assalamu alaikum.